I have a lot of clients asking me, is there one test that I can just test everything? And usually the answer is no. If you want to do a cardiovascular test, you need to do this test, or sex hormones, this test, or thyroid, this test. If you want to check organic acid markers or heavy metals, there's a different test to do. But finally, I might have the one perfect test. Probably not perfect. I'd never say a test is perfect. But there's a new test that is available in the US called NutriStat. This is a test that I did last year myself in Australia. It is super detailed and it's now available in Australia plus the US and Canada. So let's have a look at this test and what makes it so fantastic. And we'll look at all the different categories it tests, and maybe at the end we can talk about what it doesn't measure. The first part of the test looks at the cardiovascular markers. And most people are going to be familiar with cholesterol, triglycerides, HDL, LDL. These are all part of the standard lipid panel. But to get a really deep dive into your cardiovascular health, you need to measure things like lipoprotein A, apolipoprotein B, which is super important for measuring the small LDL particles, as well as inflammation markers, fibrinogen, high sensitive C-reactive protein, and homocysteine. And this test goes even deeper, looking at all the different subfractions from the intermediate density lipoproteins, which aren't as important as the low density lipoproteins. And ideally, you don't want to have any LDL 3 to 7 markers because they're the ones that are more atherogenic. The next section of the test looks at the renal and liver function tests. These are normally just part of a normal CBC test, but they're still good to check and an important part of any test. We won't spend too much time on this because this is just a normal test, and we'll look at the more advanced test options that this test provides. The NutriStat profile also measures iron levels, but not just iron, but also the other markers, iron saturation, ferritin, which is super important, and transferrin. That way you can have a better understanding if you're iron deficient, and if so, why you're iron deficient. Other vitamins like B12, folate, vitamin D are included, and there's more vitamins and minerals further down. Thyroid health is super important for overall health, yet most of the time when you go to the doctors, you only get TSH checked. It's important to check your free T4, free T3, also reverse T3, and probably most importantly is the thyroid antibodies. Often these can be elevated before there's any sign that there's actually a thyroid problem. So you can't just rely on TSH to get your thyroid checked. It's also important to measure the sex hormones. This test covers all the key ones like total testosterone, free testosterone, estrogen, sex hormone binding globulin, DHEA, plus progesterone. It'd be great if they also included LH and FSH. They're the messages from the brain to make hormones. But this gives you the key hormones that you need to check. This part of the test looks at all the beneficial minerals and looking for any deficiencies or excesses in minerals. It looks at red cell count. Some of these minerals like zinc would be ideally checked in serum, and the test also does do that, serum and copper levels of those. The NutriStat profile test looks at heavy metals, and ideally these all should be low as possible. When you see high levels of mercury like this, you may want to do further testing like the Quicksilver scientific test, or look at whether you have amalgam fillings or exposure to mercury and be more proactive in trying to reduce those levels down. So as I mentioned, copper and zinc are ideally checked in serum, not red blood cell. So that this test also does that. And so you can look at if there's excess copper to zinc ratio, which is associated with things like anxiety and mood disorders. And it'll give you a free percentage copper and a copper zinc ratio. The test looks at all of the essential amino acids. They're the ones that the body can't make. You need them in the diet. And the non-essential amino acids. They're all important. Things like glutamine is a non-essential, but it's a super vital amino acid. All the essential amino acids, non-essential amino acids, it looks at the different intermediary metabolites and other related peptides. And it may not just be diet, it could be a malabsorption issue going on here. And this is where maybe a more detailed test like the gut Zuma stool test can indicate whether you have a malabsorption issue. So most tests will only measure a blood test, but this also includes a urinary test to measure organic acids. Organic acids give you great detail into gut health, mitochondrial function, detoxification, and also looks at the cellular levels of things like B vitamins too. So it's a great addition to a blood test to do this at the same time. This part of the test looks at the urinary organic acids. And here we can look at fatty acid metabolism. This looks at how well you metabolize fats into energy, carbohydrate metabolism, and also something called the citric acid cycle, which is how your body's utilizing carbohydrates and fats and being able to convert that into energy. This is part of mitochondrial function. The next part of the organic acids test looks at the B vitamins, and this is where things like methylmalonic acid, you could have high levels here, which indicates a deficiency in B12, but you could have normal levels on a blood test. So this is a more accurate way. This is looking at the cellular levels of B12. It also looks at the neurotransmitter metabolites. To be honest, I don't pay too much attention to HVA, which is dopamine, VMA, norepinephrine, and 5-HIAA, which is serotonin, because there's no great test for measuring neurotransmitters. And this is just looking at what the body's metabolizing, so it's not that accurate. But what I do look at is things like quinolinic acid, kyurinic acid, picolinic acid, because these indicate whether you have more neuroinflammation. So instead of the body converting 5-HTP into serotonin, you could be going down this more inflammatory pathway, which is associated with anxiety, depression, brain fog, symptoms like that. This part of the organic acids test looks at oxidative stress markers. Too much oxidative stress is going to affect overall health and lead to chronic health issues or be part of chronic health issues. Detoxification markers, and also dysbiosis markers. This is just looking at the metabolites of dysbiotic bacteria. So it's not as accurate as doing an advanced stool test, but it's an indicator that you have to do work in this area, like this person here. Also looks at metabolites of candida. This is probably more accurate than a stool test because this looks at the metabolites of candida in the body. It's not just in the large intestine. The last part of the NutriStat profile looks at oxalates, which is also can be elevated with candida, and other nutritional markers for B6, B5, B2. Vitamin C is not so accurate because it's got such a short half-life, but also things like coenzyme Q10 and biotin. As you can see, the NutriStat profile is super detailed, covering a wide range of markers, and it is probably close to the perfect test. If you combine this with a stool test like the GI map or the gut zoomer, you would get a super detailed analysis of your overall health. For more information, you can find links in the description and order these from planetnaturopath.com.